Okay, guys, welcome back to All American. I'm Maddie Anderly. If you're new here, I'm the host of All American Podcast, and I'm just so excited to get into today's episode. I am in comfy athleisure attire. I just wanted to sit down and let this kind of feel more of like a heart-to-heart bestie kind of chat. So I'm really excited to dive into today's episode. And by the title of it, you probably know that this is going to be a story of my testimony and honestly just my life and how I have fallen back in love with the Lord. And I'm just, it makes me so excited to talk about. So I'm glad you're here. First things first, I want to start out because I know I have people coming in from all over listening to this podcast. And, you know, you might know me from high school. You might know me from just finding me on TikTok. You might know me from my party stage. Like, I feel like there's listeners from all over the place. And no matter how you've come across my page or how you've known me in the past or present, I think the thing that I really want to start out with is I love Jesus with my whole heart. And I hope that that is the first thing that you notice about me. And my whole point of this podcast is to point people towards Jesus and the truth of God's word and deliver messages from a biblically sound perspective. So with that being said, I want to start out with just saying I love the Lord. He has changed my life. And obviously a testimony is speaking about how Jesus has changed your life. And I have never, thinking back on it, I actually have never given a long form format of my testimony before on social media. And I think that's one thing I really feel led to share in the beginning of my podcast stages, because if I don't start out my podcast by sharing how God has changed my life, then what am I doing? And at first I was like, well, like it's very in depth, it's very vulnerable. And also, do people really want to hear about my whole life story? You know, I feel like a lot of people come to podcasts for help in their life and advice and encouragement. And so I just want to tell you, if you're listening, this technically is, I guess, a story about my life, but there is going to be so many bits and pieces where I'm like feeding truth and encouragement into you and just the lessons that I've learned. So I really hope that this is encouraging and that you, no matter what you're going through, if you're going through a similar situation in life that I have gone through, I hope that this helps you. So with that being said, let's get into my testimony. A couple days ago, I posted a TikTok where I shared a somewhat in-depth version of my testimony, but this is going to be very in-depth and I hope I don't regret this, but I don't have a problem with sharing my testimony, because when we share about our past as a story and testament of what God's grace has done in our lives, it takes the pressure off of how bad you might look for things you've done in the past. And it springs people forward into thinking like, okay, this is how she has been transformed, and who she is now compared to who she was in the past are two different people. And that is only the evidence of the grace of Jesus. And so at first I was a little nervous to share my full story, because you don't want to talk about the parts where you messed up or where you could have done better, or maybe you were arrogant or hypocritical, or it's just hard to share those things. But I hope that this like encourages you how much Jesus can change your life, because he has done a full 180 in me. Let's just say that. Okay, so first things first, I want to start out with, I grew up in a Christian home. And like I said in my TikTok, I feel like a lot of people start out their podcast like that. But I really did just grow up in a amazing Christian home. My dad was a pastor, and you heard last week's episode with my dad that he was a pastor, and he obviously is so wise and he led our family so well. So did my mom. She literally was the best stay-at-home mom, and she still did a lot of like volunteering and serving at our school and our church. And like my parents, just obviously no one's perfect, but my parents really like raised my brother and I up well and had a great family life. And I don't take that for granted, because I know that's not the same for everyone. And I just want to start out with saying it's funny how I had such a great upbringing and knew God. Uh, was taught everything. I went to VBS and every summer for like my whole childhood. Like I was in the Bible Belt. Like I knew every Bible story and Bible reference. And it's just funny because like I knew about God, but I'd never, like, obviously I wasn't perfect when I was a kid or a young teen, but I'd never gone through something so traumatic, or I've never like seen myself act so blatantly sinful to the point where I realized how much we need the grace of Jesus. So I think I was 13 when I got baptized and really accepted my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And it's not that I didn't mean it then. Like I said, at that point, with the knowledge that I had, I knew like I wanted to spend my life with Jesus and there was no turning back. I had witnessed it myself and had grown up in truth to where, and I'm so thankful I did. Like, I'm glad that I was raised up to know the Bible and to know his truth. But again, I feel like I just had this limited perspective of what it was really like. And so, yeah, I started out that way. I got baptized when I was 13, and through high school, I went to a Christian high school, and I've dealt with like bullying in the past. I feel like that's a subject for another day. That isn't really like a whole part of my testimony, but that was a really hard time in my life. I went through like some bullying in junior high and some in high school, but high school was one of those things where I just wanted so badly to be the popular person, popular girl at school. And I just wasn't. Like, I had friends, and like my school, I had 45 kids in my grade. So like it was such a small high school, and it was like a K through 12 high school or school, like a private education kind of thing. And I'm so thankful for how I was raised going to school, and we had like worship and kind of like we almost had like a church service midday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at my school, which like, again, that has shaped me so much into who I am. And I even saw in like high school, I don't know if any of you guys have also gone to a Christian college or high school or school in general before, but I saw people going two ways if you went to a school like that. You either loved it and it built you into a very strong Christian and really helped you develop these like attributes of a Christian, and you appreciated that you grew up that way and that you got to know God that way, or it really pushed you away from the Lord for some reason, and you felt like it was more of like a what am I trying to say? Like a bubble, and you didn't get to experience anything else. And so when you got to college or real life, you were like, oh, this is what the real world's like. Like, that school sucked. And, you kind of like drift away from the Lord. I feel like I kind of saw like two of those things happening. Like, it either helped you in your Christian walk or it drifted you away from your Christian walk because it was shoved down your throat. And I still have people that follow me from high school, and I feel like there's just mixed opinions on that. But I do think at times it was very like shoved down your throat Christianity, but I am thankful that I grew up that way and got to know the Lord while I was in school. So again, I just was raised in a very strong Christian bubble, and I'm thankful for that. Do I think that the church or Christians in general can make it very cringy, I guess is a good word? Maybe, but I'm just thankful that I was surrounded with it and versus not surrounded with it, if that makes sense. So grew up like that. Then I went to a Christian college. So it just kept going. And literally I loved that atmosphere, I think. And then I went to Dallas Baptist University, and I, again, still have so many like followers or still some friends from college. But I think that was where I was like, okay, I think it's not that it was bad, but it was just a lot. And there was almost this Christian culture, at least this is how my college was, of like, if you don't act a certain way or you don't go to this certain church that all the DBU students go to, or I don't know, you were like struggling or you were partying or whatever it was, like you were just kind of like such a sinful person, and it was very hateful at times, I guess is a good word. Like, yeah, it was pretty toxic at times. So anyways, I went to Dallas Baptist. I think there were so many beautiful things about it. Again, we had chapel. I think chapel was Monday, Wednesday, Friday too. And it was so great. Like, it was a blessing, and there were so many events and things and outreaches and things like that at school there that I loved. And this is not me coming against DBU at all, but there were also just people there where I was like, okay, like, you need to take a chill pill. We're all human. We all mess up. Like, you need to get off your high horse. You're not perfect either. And anyway, so I dealt with like a lot of this like self-righteousness in college from other people. So I have the type of personality where if I feel like there are people being self-righteous towards me, then it makes me want to completely act against them and be rebellious even more. I don't know where that comes from. I feel like I should talk to my therapist about that, but like, I have this need, and I even had this with my parents. Like, if they were like, hey, don't do that, like, that's not going to be good for you, I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. Like, I've always been that way, and I had to really unlearn some of my stubbornness and my rebellion. And I'll get into this later, but I even did the same thing towards the Lord. And so I'm getting ahead of myself, but basically college, I was about to leave. Like I've said before, I was only there 2 years. So by the time I was about to wrap up sophomore year, I knew I was leaving college, and I was about to get an apartment with my best friend at the time. And I just remember I started drinking all the time. I had like kind of had some friends at school that still secretly like to party, even though we went to like a Baptist university. We were like, oh, like, do you have a connection for alcohol? Like, oh my gosh. And I was still underage at that point. So I was like, anytime someone said like, oh yeah, I have someone that can get us alcohol, I was like, what? So yeah, I started drinking a little bit. And then once I moved in with my roommate into an apartment in Dallas after college, I was starting to work at for my business for photography, and I was growing my business, and I just started meeting new kinds of people. I honestly can't even remember how I've met some of these people. Like, it feels like a fever dream when you think about like your party phase, because you're like, wait, how did that happen? Or like, how did I meet those people? How did I hang out with those people all the time? I think a lot of it was like a friend of a friend, or like, I don't even know, like social media at that point might have been a big part of it. Like, hey, just come out with us, or like, let's just grab a drink. And I don't know if this was like me being raised in a Christian bubble, but if someone was like, hey, like, come to this party, there's gonna be alcohol there's gonna be boys there, like, it's gonna be so fun. I was like, oh my gosh, like, that sounds so fun. I've never gotten to do that before. And I started to find this appeal in pursuing the party lifestyle, where I was like, I've never seen anything like this before. Like, genuinely, just because I'd grown up the way I did, I'd never been around that kind of thing. I think if I did in high school, I probably would have just gotten it out of my system beforehand, but obviously I'm glad I didn't party in high school, but that's just me. So yeah, I would go to parties in Dallas, or would drive to random friends' schools like A&M or TCU, and I would just like go party with their friends. And I just started slowly developing this like cobweb of random friends that I barely knew, but I thought I wanted to be friends with them because they would go party with me. And my roommate at the time like didn't drink, which is totally fine, and that's her choice. But like, obviously I wasn't like drinking at home, like with her, or like having parties at my apartment. So I was just going out and about on the town, and then I turned 21, and then it just kept escalating. I was like, oh, now it's legal and I can go buy it and I can drink it in my room. And I just found this like, I don't know, like addiction is not the word. I don't think I was addicted to alcohol. Like, I don't want to say that as like it was an addiction, but it was something that I just was starting to really attach to the point that I was like, I want to go buy it. I want to drink it all the time. I wanted to go anywhere that had alcohol involved, and I depended on it for a social life. So yeah, alcohol just became such a big part of my life at this point. And then I met a guy, and before my ex-boyfriend, I had obviously gone on other dates. I had um messed around a little bit, but I was still a virgin. In my eyes, I was like, okay, I'm still a virgin, and I hold a lot of pride in that. And um I wanted, like, my whole life, even if I was partying and stuff, I was like, my virginity is something I really cherish, and I want to save that for my husband. And looking back, it makes me emotional because I really wish I did for Nick. And so if you are a virgin, like, this is a side note, do not let the world make you feel like you have to give that up, because everyone acts like it is such a normal thing to just hook up with people, or the first real boyfriend you get, that's just what you do. You just have sex together. I'm telling you, that is not worth it. No matter if you think you're going to marry them one day or not, it is not worth giving up. If you are a virgin, I strongly encourage you to wait. Coming from someone who really wanted to and didn't, uh, it's one of my biggest regrets in life. And again, the Lord has mercy on us. And for those of us that didn't wait, the Lord has so much grace on us, and we can move forward in grace after we repent and turn our lives to Him. Uh, and that's what I did eventually. I had to just accept that, I did that, and that's a part of my story now. And I wish I didn't, but I need to move forward and walk in the grace that God has given me. So even if you have had sex before, I encourage you to re-wait with your next boyfriend. That's what Nick and I did, and it was a beautiful blessing in our marriage. So anyways, yeah, I was partying. I turned 21. I would go to this place called Red River in Dallas. And if you're a local, you just know it is such a crazy ghetto bar, country bar. People just go there to be ratchet. They go there to get hammered. And I loved two-stepping. Like, I am a Texas girl through and through, no matter what happens to me in life. Like, I love Texas. I love Texas culture. I love two-stepping. I used to be so good at two-stepping. I haven't in so long, but I would just go to dance because I loved that part of it. But also I would go with friends because I knew it was just the place to go and just get effed up, and like no one cared. So I had these random friends at the time that I had met through partying some other way. I honestly cannot remember. It's funny how trauma like really blocks memories in your brain, because some things I still don't remember to this day. But these two girls, I remember their names, but I don't remember how I met them. But they went with me to Red River one night. I think it was like a Thursday night, because that was like ladies' night, and that was like the night to go. And you also got in for free, so we're like, duh, free. So we went, and I like met this guy that was a bouncer there, which should have been my first red flag, but he was a bouncer there and like hit on me or something. And he was like, I want to take you out tomorrow if you're free. And I was like, yes. So we went to lunch the next day, and then literally at that lunch and beyond, it was love bombing so hard that and again, I'd never had like a very serious boyfriend before. I had one in high school, but it wasn't like, it was high school and it was not very serious. And like, now that I was an adult and I was working, it was like, oh, I can have like a serious boyfriend. Like, that's crazy. And so I did, and the love bombing was something I wasn't used to. And I think looking back at myself at that point in my life, I was so naive, and it's not an excuse, but when you think back on things in your life where you're like, why did I do that? Like, I should have known better. Like, I was so naive that I just did not know any better. I had never experienced it before. I had never experienced like love bombing and a guy coming on super strong, like acting like he's very interested in you. Like, it was just so new to me. Looking back, I'm like, well, duh, you should have ran for the hills, because he clearly didn't actually love you 2 days in. But yeah, I mean, from the moment we met, it was like we were just hanging out every single day. And I became so infatuated with this person who was giving me so much of their time, so much of their attention, driving to see me. And if you know, like Dallas is huge, and like driving between cities in Dallas is just 30 minutes or more. So I was like, this guy's like driving to see me and like taking me out and like giving me all his attention whenever I would go visit him at Red River and just like stuff like that. Like in my eyes, as a 21-year-old who was super naive, I was like, I feel so loved and appreciated. So I just really fell into this trap of like the love bombing. And if I can encourage any girl out there, if you feel like you're being love bombed, you probably are. And it's not worth seeing through to see if it's real or not. Like, it's probably love bombing. So, yeah, I basically went to lunch with him one day and he's like, I just need to let you know that I have a girl best friend. And I was like, again, naive. I was like, oh, sure, that's fine. Like, no big deal. I totally get that. Like, I have other guy friends, like, whatever. Again, I wish I could go back and shake myself and be like, what were you thinking? Because that should have been another red flag to me. And again, this is how you learn. This is how you know for next time. And anyways, so I was like, no big deal. Slowly over time, I would notice him talking to her on the phone. Like, we'd be hanging out at my apartment and he would go on the patio and take a call from her and just talk to her while I'm just literally sitting inside. He, you know, if I would go visit him at work, I forgot to mention this, she was the bartender at Red River as well. So they worked together late at night. They were drinking obviously at work, and it was just a really bad setup. And it was like the whole group of them would invite me to like go out with them or hang out at like one of their apartments and have a party. And I'd be like, yes, like I just want to hang out with my man. Like, you know, you just like think like, yeah, like I'll make myself fit in with this group. And I was just drinking all the time, and there would be a lot of like smoking, and my ex-boyfriend got me into like smoking marijuana sometimes. Like, I was just completely absorbed in the world. Like, I feel like I blinked and it went from Christian college, really sweet, innocent girl, to you are a part of the world and your whole friend group and atmosphere and environment has completely changed. And I caught myself like, okay, this is a little rowdy. Like, even for me, who was really like enjoying the drinking and everything at that point, I was like, this is very rowdy. So without giving too many details, because I do think like there needs to be some level of privacy as much as I want to be vulnerable. But the physical and sexual line in that relationship started to get more blurry. And I think, and if you've been in this situation, you know, it is a slippery slope with sexual sin. It's like, oh, just one more little thing or that comment or that touch or whatever it is, like, oh, just one more thing. Like, it's not a big deal. But that little deal, like that thing that's not a big deal, pushes the line to where the line gets so blurry that you find yourself in a very bad situation. And so I wish back then that I had just nipped it in the bud and been like, you know what, this isn't really like honoring to God or respectful to myself. But I let him disrespect me in that area, and he knew I was a virgin. And I'm not going to say the number of women that this guy had been with before me, but he told me that he had been with X amount of women before me. And I was like, holy crap, I have found myself in a relationship with a guy who has a literal sex addiction. And I didn't know that until I quote unquote fell in love with him. And to the point where I was like, at that point, I was so far invested that I was like, you know what? I'm just going to forgive him for that. Like, that was his past. But it wasn't just his past. Like, that was still how he wanted to live then. And all that to say, like, when someone has a sex addiction, and I don't think this guy would ever own up to it to say that that's what it is, but it is that. When you have a sex addiction like he did, it pushes your, I don't know what the right, I mean, I know what the right word is, but I don't know if I want to say it on my podcast, but it pushes what you find appealing in sex to be more aggressive, more intense, more disrespectful, more grimy and slimy. And you're just like feeling so disrespected afterward. It led to abuse, and abuse is such a strong word. And there are so many women that struggle with it that don't say anything. I think it's more common than we think, but sexual abuse was something that I was not validating myself in. I was like, oh, that's just how it is. Like, since it was my first time with this guy, I didn't know any better. And I was like, oh, that's just how sex is, I guess. Like, it's supposed to be disrespectful and rough and mean and hurt. Like, it's supposed to hurt you. And at that time, like, genuinely, I thought that's just how it is. And that's what guys need. And that's what guys want. And so I sat through this relationship being like, is this normal? Like, in my head, I was like, this feels a little intense. And, anyways, after we did the deed, he bragged, like, I can't believe that I'm the one that took Maddie Fischelli's virginity. And he acted like it was a prize to put on his shelf of, I did that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I was crying on the other end of the phone while he was saying this. And I was like, I can't believe I did that. I was dumbfounded that the line had gotten so blurry that I got to that point of, I gave up this valuable treasure for this guy who was bragging about taking it from me. And while he was doing it, he was disrespecting me and not treating me as a beautiful woman of God, or treating me as a child of God. So anyways, I was at this point sexually involved with this guy, and I found out that he had been cheating on me with his girl best friend, who was also married to a guy I went to college with. And I knew the guy decently well, not personally, but I knew he had a good reputation, that he was super nice and respectful. And yeah, I found out that she and him had feelings for each other, and they would hang out all the time and talk all the time, and physically cross some lines. And yeah, I just sat there like, I can't believe I gave up my whole life for this guy. I had completely been stripped of my identity and got nothing in return, and was just completely trampled on emotionally, of just like, I gave all this to you, but you just took that from me, and now you're with someone else, and you want to be with someone else, and you've just left me in the dust, and you don't care about my feelings. So that's a very short version of that relationship. And I wish I could go into more detail on some of like the narcissism and stuff like that. And that is something I want to talk about, because there was a lot of gaslighting and narcissism, and I actually want to talk about that in the new year. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, at this point, I felt so used up. They started their life together. And I was just left here feeling abused, heartbroken, just so far from the Lord. I had completely lost myself in this guy, and I had to start rebuilding myself, for lack of better words. I had to completely restart my life, and I felt so far from God. I was like, how did I get here? Like, just a few months ago, I was like, I felt a little bit closer to you than now, like, and now I'm just so broken. And in that moment, I was so thankful for the Lord's grace, but at the same time, I didn't surrender my life to him. I didn't change my life at that point. And so I started partying even more. And at this point, I was like, well, I've already lost my virginity, so I'm going to sleep around some more, which is so twisted. But in my head, I was like, well, I've already gave it up, which sounds so bad, but that was my mentality at that point. And so I basically started partying even more, try to find validation in alcohol and partying. And I would go drink by myself all the time. And that's when I started to be like, okay, like, I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life, because this is so bad. I would go drive to bars, and I just couldn't wait to go drive to a bar, like random restaurant bars even. And just sit there and drink and take shots. And I even remember like the bartenders being like, girl, are you okay? Because you're literally just sitting here by yourself getting drunk. And then I would drive home. And drinking and driving is so stupid. I feel like my mom had a sixth sense for that because she would just know if I had been drinking and driving. Like, I don't know how she knew that, but she'd always be like, are you sure? Like, at least get an Uber. Like, at least get an Uber so you're safe. Anyways, just this reckless cycle kept happening. And then I got really depressed. I would say like 6 to 8 months later. And this is when I dyed my hair dark brown. I was like in that depression hole, if you know what I mean. And I was just so sad. I wish like right when the breakup happened that I had just like turned my life back to Jesus, but I still was trying to figure it out myself. And that led to me being so depressed, so heartbroken. I would stay in bed all day long. My friends would have to come drive to me and just hang out with me in my apartment because I refused to get out. It was also the dead of winter and I get seasonal depression. So I feel like that also did contribute. But at the same time, I was just so mentally gone and spiritually gone that I would like find myself laying on my living room floor, like face down on my living room rug. And I would like, like this sounds so like detailed, but I would like grab the rug and I would scream into it, almost like it was like my pillow, you know, but I was like on the floor, just I would collapse from depression and I would literally lay on the floor face down and just scream because I was so angry at myself and I was angry at God somehow of like, how did I get here and why'd you allow this to happen to me? So I was just so broken. So then naturally I decided to move to Nashville. Why did I decide to do that? I really don't know. I really did want to change of scenery and that is valid. I feel like a lot of people do that after a breakup. They just want a change of scenery, but I just moved because I was like, I need a break. I need some space. I want to just make new friends, and all of that. And I just found some Facebook marketplace like roommates and I moved into their house. And before I knew it, I just packed up my car and left. And it was really sad to leave my family. But I was so excited to just get on the road and try something new. And I thought that would cure my depression if I just got out of Dallas a little bit. And so moving there, I started partying. Like literally the first night I was there, my roommates were like, come out with us. Like we'll get you acquainted with Nashville. And I was like, okay. And I went and just started partying even more. If you've been to Nashville or you're familiar, you know that it is such a big drinking town. Everything you do in Nashville really revolves around drinking. I'm actually going in January and I'm excited to take my husband and show him like where I lived and like the cool coffee shops and stuff. But like I'll pass on all the bar scene this time around. But it's such a big party town. That's just how you socialize there. And like, I do love the country music atmosphere. Like I said, like I love this country culture that I also grew up in Texas. Like that means a lot to me. The country music scene means a lot to me. I respect it. Even just going to like writers' rounds and stuff like that. Like you go to like socialize and to listen to good music, but there's always the alcohol. So like I was just around it every single day. My roommates would have parties like all the time at our house. And I don't know, I just was letting myself completely rebel against the Lord. And at this point I knew I was rebelling against God, but I just didn't care. And that goes back to my personality type of like, if someone tells me don't do that, or that's bad for you, I'm like, I need to know for myself. So I'm going to do it anyway. And I don't listen to people's advice. I just go for it. And I've learned a lot since realizing that about myself. But yeah, I partied all the time. And basically I to spare you all the party details, that's not important. But basically, I was in Nashville for 6 months. At the 6th month, I was out one night and oh my gosh, this was so bad. I literally went to this place that's like just moonshine. It's like a moonshine place. They have all these different flavors. I went with some random friends that I didn't know. And I wish I knew the name of what the place was in Nashville, but it was like a moonshine place. And if you know, like moonshine is very strong. I just didn't know that. I'd never had moonshine before. And it was like all these like samplers of different flavors. And I, no joke, think I had like 10 sampler shots. So imagine like a communion cup. Like it wasn't like a full on shot, but it was like communion cups. But then they give you a full cup of beer or something like that to go with it. So I had all of that. And I guess I had texted my roommate to come pick me up because I was trashed. And she basically picks me up and I'm like, "Are you my Uber for Maddie?" I couldn't even realize that my roommate was picking me up and not a random Uber driver. Like there are so many stories that I wish I could talk about, but I don't want to talk about because it's not important. And again, the Lord redeems, right? But so many stories where I'm like, how is that me? Like genuinely, I look back and I'm like, you are so freaking stupid for that. It's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like, girl, you were so freaking lost. So yeah, that night happened. I got so trashed. It was bad. Like I was obviously throwing up, all that. But I got home and I guess like I don't remember any of this. I was blacked out, but I guess I was trying to take a bath. Like I take a bath every single night. That's like my way to like wind down. And basically the next morning, I woke up in the bathtub with the water full, like almost completely full against like the tub line. And I was just laying back in the tub and I woke up just in the water and I was like, holy crap, what am I doing here? I didn't really have my come to Jesus moment completely then, but I was like, this is bad. Like I need to get my life together. Like this is starting to get really embarrassing for me and like disrespectful towards myself. I was getting like secondhand embarrassment for myself. And so what I forgot to share is the night before at that moonshine place, I had gone to the bathroom and I was so hammered, but I remember I was alone in the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, obviously blurry as heck, right? And I'm like, thinking to myself, like, first of all, how did I get here? But I remember hearing the Lord, and you know how it's like, you don't audibly hear the Lord, but you know when he's speaking to you. I've had a few times in my life like that where I'm like, I feel like it's like an out of body experience. Like, I'm like, I know God's talking to me. But I remember looking in the mirror and I remember him saying so clearly, there is more for you than this. I have so much more for you than this. And so it's funny how I remember hearing that, like, as blacked out as I was, I remember that like it was yesterday. And I was like, okay, I remember that. And then the next morning, wake up in the bathtub and I literally drove to Chick-fil-A the next day, like the same day as the bathtub incident. I drove to Chick-fil-A to grab some lunch. I'm hurting. Obviously, I'm hungover and I had just gotten so used to being hungover at this point. But I remember I pulled up to order Chick-fil-A and the lady's like taking my order and I was trying to order chicken nuggets or something like that. And out of nowhere, I hysterically start crying. Like not like a tear streaming down your face. I literally was like, can I get a cow chicken nugget? And I start like freaking out, shaking. And she's like, are you okay? She's like, can I give you a hug? And she like leans through my car window and gives me a hug. And she's like, everything's going to be okay. And it's embarrassing to talk about because I think I just hit my breaking point to where I just couldn't hold it anymore. And of course, I start crying in front of this Chick-fil-A lady, but she was so kind. That's the Lord's chicken, even though they put so many hormones in their chicken now. But anyways, this lady was the hands and feet of Jesus to me in that moment. So I literally got my Chick-fil-A and I'd cry in the parking lot for like an hour, hour and a half. And I told myself, you need to move home. Like, it's time. This is not helping you. All of this brokenness from your past is coming back up again. And like, you're not getting anywhere in life, not professionally, mentally, spiritually, physically. Nothing is working out for you here. And you are at a dead end and you've got to turn around and go home. So by the grace of God, I found a roommate on Facebook to fill in my lease. And I got out of my lease. I didn't think I would because I was in it for a year. And 6 months later, before I knew it, I was packing my car back up and driving home and moved in with my parents for a bit. And the whole way home, I was like, what was the point of living here? I was like, why did I move here? And what was the point of it? And did it even help me at all? And looking back now, it was just, I was searching for something to satisfy me. I was searching for something to fulfill me and give me direction in life and find finally some peace in life. And I was looking for that in a fresh start, a new city, new friends, drinking, partying, boys, the same old, same old. Uh, so yeah, I move home and I realized I was looking for Jesus the whole time. I wish I could have saved myself all of this money, time, trouble, drunk nights. I wish I could have saved all of that to just teach myself right after this breakup, hey, you just need Jesus. You just need to rely on Jesus right now. Like, that's all you need. And he is going to put you back on your feet. Instead, I searched so hard in every other area. And I was like, just so lost that when you're lost, you almost want to make yourself more lost because you're like, oh, I'll find myself one day. I don't even care. I'm just going to like let myself go loose and free and I'm going to figure it out. I don't care about anything. That's how I was. And by the time I got home, I had talked with my parents. I talked with friends. I reconnected with some friends in Dallas, like good friends. And I was like, I've got to turn my life around. And I did, slowly but surely. But a month later, after moving home, I got rebaptized and my family was there and it was so special. I got baptized in the lake right by my high school where I would drive to this lake to have quiet time in the morning before high school. And so it felt like a coming back to myself of like, wow, I did all this horrible stuff and I felt so far from God. I outright rebelled against God, but he still loves me so much. He has been there the whole time when I have been searching for love and fulfillment and satisfaction in every other area of my life. And he was there the whole time, just waiting. Like he was silently, gently there, still guiding me. Thank God I'm alive. Cause like I said, there's so many stories I could say, but it's even a miracle that I'm alive. Based off some of these stupid situations I would make or decisions I would make. But, I got baptized in the lake that I would go have my quiet times in the sunrise before high school. And that place is such a special place in my heart. And I still go when I can, when I'm in Dallas or right before I got married, I went out there and just kind of had some time with God. But anyways, I got rebaptized there. And since then, obviously it was not a perfect journey. And I still had like, God was pruning out a lot of bad habits in me still. But my heart had changed. My heart had softened to God, how do you want me to live? What does living for you look like? And I knew God more. I knew Jesus more on a personal level of you are my savior. You are my redeemer. You have saved me from such a horrible path of self-destruction that I was placing for myself. And that was the part, I'm not saying you need to wait to get to know Jesus until you've sinned enough. I wish I had known Jesus more in the beginning, right? Personally, like that. But when you know Jesus in this way of, I would be so lost without him, you fall in love with him in a completely different way. It shows like how much you depend on him for your life and for your saving and for your eternity and your salvation. You need him. You need Jesus. We needed his sacrifice so that we can literally live our lives and not feel shameful. And I think a lot of the shame I had to undo and God undid in my life of, yes, you did that. Yes, that's your past, but I have redeemed you. I have so much more for you than that. And since then, like he's just blessed my life in so many ways. And we don't live for God, for him to bless us. But because I turned to Jesus, I've just seen so many beautiful things in my life happen. And that's what happens when you live in his will for you. He has so many good things in his will for you that if you will just obey from the get-go and not be stubborn like I was and just like try to find it on your own, it's so much more beautiful that way. It's so much more seamless that way because he does it all for you. You're not scrambling, trying to do it all yourself. And living outside of God's will was so destructive. And as much as I was trying to find this like inner peace and love for myself, I was doing the opposite by trying to do this all by myself. And the Lord's will he knows exactly what we need. Exactly what we need. And I just wish I could go back and tell myself, like, just start living for him now. Like, it will save you so much time and pain. All that to say, I do not beat myself up. I do not shame myself for these things in my past, because now it has taught me so much about the character of Jesus that, in a way, as much as I sometimes regret those decisions, I am so thankful. I'm going to try not to cry. I'm so thankful that I went through such a sinful time in my life so that I can see the goodness of Jesus and the grace of Jesus in my life. Because I don't know if I would have seen it through this lens had I not gone through that. So I hope that this encourages you, that no matter if you're so broken and lost right now, there is so much hope for you. And trust me, if I can find my way back to the Lord, then you can too. Oh man, I didn't think I would get emotional on this episode. But Jesus has completely changed my life. And since the point I turned my life back to Jesus, I obviously 8 months later, I met Nick, and he has obviously been amazing, and just, he moved my life to Charlotte, and he has given me the best friends, like in Dallas and Charlotte. He's given me a stronger connection with my family, and I've just started to even treat my body better, and just my mind and my time with God. And all that to say, God has changed my life. Jesus has changed my life. And I can't not come on my podcast and talk about that first or foremost, and talk about all these future things and topics on my podcast without mentioning this is how God has changed my life. Because everything I do flows from this life that I walk with him. And so I'm going to touch on a lot of these topics in my podcast that were a part of my testimony, like alcohol, partying, friendships, narcissism, toxic relationships, like you name it. We're going to talk about all of that, but I hope you know that this is coming from a firsthand perspective, and that I'm praying for you if that's you that's dealing with something like you're in one of those situations. And feel free to always DM me or send me a voice memo. I want to talk with you guys, and I just hope that you feel encouraged, and I love you guys so much. I will see you next week for our next episode. It'll actually be launching on my birthday, so it's going to be a very special episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow the podcast, or leave a review. That would mean so much to me. And also follow the Instagram for the podcast at All American Pod, and we'll have lots more updates on there. But I hope this blesses you, and I'm just so thankful for all of you that listen every week.